What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
You know what we're doing today, guys. We are recapping UFC 323. Nick, let's get right into the main event. This was one of the best bantamweight fights that I've ever seen. I think it was one of the best bantamweight fights in the history of the division. Certainly one of the top 3 title fights in all of bantamweight history.
For sure.
The skill level that was on display is just a constant reminder of how good the sport is becoming and how these fighters are evolving as athletes. I mean, the competition level today is comparable to nothing that we saw prior to this. I mean, Merab Dvalishvili, who I said in the build-up, I also predicted him to win incorrectly. I said in the build-up video that we did to this card that I believe he's already the best bantamweight of all time. And I think that still stands true when you look at the 14-fight win streak, who he beat, you know, how he became the champion and all of that. He certainly has a case even still to be number one. But then you look at a guy like Petr Yan, right? Came in last night and fought about as flawless of a fight that you could possibly fight.
Insane.
More takedowns landed on Merab than Merab landed on him. Devastating strikes, really good clinch work, excellent speed, excellent power, excellent durability. Like everything was what you would hope to see out of Petr Yan. And it just makes me think, you know, how interesting one little moment can be for the course of a division, right?
Right.
That knee that he did to Aljamain Sterling way back in the day.
Right. The illegal
They got
knee.
him disqualified, and then he came back and lost sort of a lackluster, rematch against Aljamain Sterling. But had that knee not happened, he was on his way to finishing Aljamain Sterling. They probably wouldn't have given him the rematch just based on how that fight was going. And would we be sitting here now, had that not happened, talking about Petr Yan being potentially the best bantamweight of all time? And so I just say that to say that I think what Yan is doing right now and the performance he put on last night, even though he did have a 3-fight losing streak not that long ago, he's still one of the best ever to do it at 135, right?
100%. And to beat Merab the way he did is so impressive. You know, especially a guy who has fought him before, didn't go his way. He went 50-45 against Merab in their first fight. So it really wasn't that competitive. Also had that 3-fight losing streak. Also just had the worst, you know, hands dealt to him with the O'Malley decision. A lot of people thought he won that fight. I thought it was a close fight, so it's not a robbery, but I was starting to get concerned that Petr Yan may never live up to the potential that we thought he could live up to, and which is saying a lot because he had already become the world champion. And we're like, oh, there's still a lot more left on the bone for this guy. But he showed that he's fine against any style, anybody in the division, and clearly he's got ice running through his veins. I guess he's used to that Russian weather where it's cold, but man, he does not get bothered by a loss. He doesn't get bothered by an exchange not going his way. And then one thing I'll say, we see it all the time when you're scrolling Instagram, doom scrolling, you'll see a video that says, is Petr Yan the most technical fighter in the UFC, the whole UFC? And then they'll put his highlights together, and you start to think he might be one of the most technical and well-rounded fighters in the entire UFC. His arsenal of tools is so high level. Like, was anybody expecting him to make Merab go 2 of 29 on takedowns and then also score the majority of the takedowns he attempted
and then
on
you
Merab?
Turn around and land 5 on him? That's insane.
Like,
no, I don't think anybody was anticipating that.
Right. And then on the feet, he looked really sharp. And we can come to expect that out of Petr. He's very high level with his striking. He mixes in those trips really well. Obviously, he was looking to do more than just stand with Merab last night. He had to show Merab, I'm not afraid of your wrestling. I'll show you high-level takedown defense. And then as a matter of fact, I'm going to start to take you down. But I was really impressed with how Petr Yan was able to put pressure on Merab. Merab is the pressure forward guy. He's always coming. I mean, if you look at the striking, the numbers, he landed more strikes than Petr Yan last night. But he also lost 4 of the 5 rounds.
Yeah.
And we were halfway through the fight. I was trying to figure out who won. I was like, you know, damage-wise in the first round, Petr Yan landed that big shot, but he didn't do near as much as Merab. So I guess you give that first round to Merab. And then I was having a hard time finding any other round to score for Merab, especially the ones that had the body kicks in them. Those liver kicks from Petr Yan were so thunderous. And I mean, when you get the reaction, it's so funny. We were talking about it last night. There's not a man on planet Earth that can get hit by a liver shot and not react. And you're talking about a world champion, one of the most durable guys. His name is the Machine. Nothing seems to faze Merab. He gets hit with that body kick, and anybody who's been hit in the liver knows exactly what he was going through. Most people, 9 out of 10, even fighters in the UFC, fall to the ground when that happens. Merab just had to let out a scream and take a few steps back. But what Petr Yan showed us out there is, if you truly believe that you're the best in the world and you keep improving on all the skill sets that you have, and you truly believe that no matter where this guy tries to take the fight, you're going to have the upper hand, crazy things can happen. And I believe Petr Yan, even though he probably had the right to lose some confidence in himself years ago, he seemed to brush all that away. He's got his head focused now. He's the world champion once again. And to be honest, to go from being the world champion to losing 3 fights in a row to now getting back on a win streak and becoming world champion again, I don't think there's many people in the UFC's history that have had that difficult of a road to the belt and then back to the belt. It's almost unheard of.
So for a champion to lose their belt and then become a champion again is like almost impossible.
Think Leon Edwards could try it?
Definitely not. I mean, Leon Edwards will be lucky if he wins, 2 fights in a row before his career's over. So when you think about champions that lose their belt, come back and regain it, Israel Adesanya.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple, but there is George St. Pierre, for example. How many of those, if any, went on 3-fight losing streaks at one point and then came back to be the champion?
Probably not.
And the crazy thing is, Yan won the belt in his 20s. So he's still squarely in his prime.
Yeah.
And now that I think Merab was absolutely the most difficult fight for him.
For sure.
And probably in a lot of ways, he's going to have to beat Merab for 10 rounds, not 5.
Yeah.
Because now they're 1-1. Right. So the likely thing that they're going to do, because that was an all-time great bantamweight fight,
right,
is run that one back.
Yeah.
Umar Nurmagomedov is on the books for January, I believe now.
Figgy,
Figgy, he's got him. And then Peyton Talbott, really kind of thrusted himself forward last night. But they're going to likely make him win 1 or 2 more. Sean O'Malley is going to take on Song Yadong. You got to think Petr Yan would love to have that one back at some point in time. But I think all signs are pointing to the guy that was on the 14-fight win streak and being a company man, 5 fights in just a little over a year, being allowed to take a crack at getting his belt back. And so what we're going to get is an all-time great bantamweight trilogy between Merab and Petr Yan. But I don't see how that's a very likely win for Merab now that he's the kind of the cat is out of the bag now. Petr Yan not only can defend Merab Dvalishvili's takedowns, which is I picked Merab because of the amount of takedowns he landed in the first fight.
Yeah.
Petr Yan has corrected that in his game.
Yeah.
So now we know that it's very difficult for Merab to take him down. And not only that, Petr can take Merab down. And we know on the feet that there's a disparity, even though Merab has kind of enjoyed falling in love with his hands and his striking over the last few fights. He will never be a sniper type fighter like Petr Yan is.
Right.
So I think the likelihood of Merab winning the rematch in the trilogy is actually low. I would expect Petr to be the pretty big favorite. Now, that fight has not even been made yet. We'll break that down and predict it when and if it gets made. But I'm just saying from an early prediction standpoint, I think that Petr would be a pretty heavy favorite. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
So if Petr can get through Merab a second time, then you've beaten an all-time bantamweight great in the trilogy, and he still has the years to go to, rack up 3 or 4 more defenses and potentially become a true all-time great at bantamweight himself. So the division couldn't be hotter right now. And I guess my hope is that they make the rematch. I think that's kind of what everybody would love to see. Dana doesn't do any matchmaking on Saturday night. We know that. But what do you think will happen? Do you think Merab will get the rematch? Do you think that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think he deserves a rematch. Merab obviously took a lot of damage. His face is all beat up, but that's going to heal in a few weeks. And Merab, I guarantee you, this week will be training again. He'll be in the gym. He'll be licking his wounds, but also still staying active. And Merab is not the kind of guy that's going to go just hide out and stay away for a year. He's going to try to get right back on the horse, right back out there and right this wrong. But I kind of agree with you that Petr Yan figured out how to beat him. And I think that Petr Yan getting all that time and getting to watch multiple title fights, a lot of which went 5 rounds, that gave him much more footage, current footage of Merab Dvalishvili. And again, Merab is a ever-evolving fighter. He's getting better. There's no doubt about that. But there are certain things in Merab's style that have made him the champion, and he's not going to abandon those things that worked so well for him. Unfortunately, Petr Yan just dissected his game enough to figure out those things that make him tick, the things that get him his hand raised, and figured out how to negate them. Obviously, what he did with the range management was crazy, because he was forcing Merab to shoot from way too far away. Merab sort of did what they call like Frankenstein or zombie arms, right? Trying to get a hold of Yan any way he could. And Yan just had so many answers for the clinch. He had every answer up against the cage. Even when Merab would get to his back, and he's got a very good grip, he's looking to take him down up against the fence. Yan, he's making sure that his balance was intact. He's trying to fight the hands. But a lot of guys in the UFC, and it's not illegal, they can't grab their opponent's hand or their glove of any kind. But you can grab your own glove, and that's totally legal.
Yeah.
I believe Merab might have his hand locked into his own other glove when he does those types of locks. That's why nobody can break the grip. But we started to see the grip get broken a little bit when Petr Yan would put pressure on the grip, and then he would start elbowing the forearms. It sort of opened up a little bit of space in between his body and Merab's arms, and that's how he was able to sort of dig himself back in. I thought that was very high level. We'll see professional boxers do this from time to time. A lot of times early in their fights, they'll start to wear on the arms, the weapons of their opponent. They'll start, Canelo Alvarez is famous for, if you've got a high guard, he'll just start punching your hands this way. It doesn't feel good. It's like the opposite of a hyperextension. It doesn't feel very good. But also, if you start throwing heavy hooks and you're beating up the arms, forearm, shoulder, whatever it is, that starts to slow their weapons down. And that's sort of what I felt like we were seeing. Petr Yan, he's very high level, and what he was able to do was basically take weapons from Merab systematically one by one, and then you're fighting a guy who almost feels like he's panicking. Merab towards the end felt like, all right, it doesn't feel like I'm up on the scorecard. So Merab had to fight a little bit more tenacious later in the fight, where Petr Yan was fully in his groove. Now, I will say in the third round, I was starting to see a little bit of gas on Petr Yan. I wasn't sure if maybe the 3 rounds was going to be prime for him, and the championship rounds were where Merab would thrive. But it looked like that minute in between round 3 and 4 gave Yan the rest that he needed to finish out the fight strong. And, man, there's not much you can say wrong about his performance. Merab obviously is just, I'm not even going to say that it was a mismatch or he doesn't belong in there with Yan, because he's clearly the second best now bantamweight in the world. But it does just feel to me like he might have been a little bit too active in these past 15 months. And when you're fighting and cutting weight once every 3 months for 15 months straight, eventually you're going to stub your toe. Eventually somebody is going to come in a little fresher. They're going to be studying your game, and they're going to devise the game plan perfectly to how to beat you. And I just think that Yan came in with a perfect game plan.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that rematch be in about 6 months, because I think Merab has done a lot for the company over the last 36 months.
For sure.
So, he does need time to heal up. And I think, and he said it in the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, I tried to give the fans a good fight tonight. I tried to do more striking and win it with my striking. Maybe that was a mistake. I think that was more him saying that than the reality of it, because he was certainly trying to wrestle. When you attempt 20 plus takedown attempts, you're trying to wrestle.
Yeah.
He just couldn't get the takedown. So I think it was more along the lines of Peter had the solution rather than Merab trying to give an exciting fight. But Merab has tried to be a compelling fighter just in sheer activity alone.
Yeah.
What he lacks in Alex Pereira type knockouts, he makes up for in just the fact that he's this cardio machine who's fighting every other month, it seems.
Right. And the other thing too about those takedowns, he got 2 takedowns, I believe, but we kind of looked at each other whenever they happened, because Peter got straight back up to his feet. They were mat returns. They weren't true takedowns where the top position was solidified. So Petr Yan's takedown defense, even on the times where he got taken down, was flawless, because he really didn't get controlled.
Yeah, and that's the mat returns, and that's something that Daniel Cormier and Ben Askren were actually talking about.
Yeah.
That I think on social media, I saw that on back and forth on Twitter, that, a lot of those takedowns that Merab is scored by wrestling, and we're not talking about wrestling, we're talking about MMA, but still it's worth noting that those are really more like mat returns than they are a takedown, because the position, especially last night, it didn't seem like, Merab was able to solidify anything on the ground. Yeah, he got 2 takedowns, But what did he really do with those takedowns? I mean, the reversals were incredible, by the way, on both sides.
Both ends, yeah.
Those, like when Peter got his takedown, the Merab reversal was unbelievable. And then about 30 seconds later, Peter hit the same move. I mean, this was some high level stuff. So I do think that, and I'm like you, like when I was watching and scoring this fight, I did give the first round to Merab. I found it hard to give Merab any other rounds. I think Peter clean sweeped him the last 4 rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I think the judges got it right, 49-46. One judge had it 48-47.
Yeah.
I personally had it 4 rounds to 1. The first round from Merab, and then everything after that was all Petr Yan. And it shows you that the judges are really kind of prioritizing the damage.
Yeah.
Because Merab, as you said, landed more strikes than Petr Yan did last night.
Yep.
But Petr Yan did the damage. He landed the heavy strikes. He had his opponent literally screaming in pain. I mean, Merab, those belches that he let out.
Oh yeah.
It's like, but think about it, like, now I know Petr Yan he's technically better, but he's not the size of Alistair Overeem.
Right.
And he certainly isn't on all the supplementation that Alistair Overeem was on
back in the day
when he fought Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
But Brock Lesnar is a 300-pound man who's on a lot of supplementation of his own.
Yeah.
Who literally screamed like a child and fell to his finish,
to his demise.
In that fight.
Yeah.
So, the fact that Merab was even staying up on those shots,
Bro.
Our old boxing coach, Alfonso Lopez, is famous for when we used to spar, you just get hit with brutal body shots by some of those boxers. And he would always just be in the corner like, stay up on that, Steven. Stay up on that, Nick. It's like, dude, I wish I could. My liver has given out. I am no longer in control. The liver's in control now. And like Merab had incredible grit to not hit the deck on those shots.
It's like the opposite of that R. Kelly song. My mind is telling me no, but my body's telling me no. It's my mind is telling me yes, I should stay up, but for some reason my body is falling over.
Telling
right
me,
now.
We're all done here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, incredible fight.
I really hope they rebook that fight. I'd love to see the trilogy between Merab and Yan. If Merab wants to take a little time, I don't think anybody should expect him to have to do a contenders fight to get another title shot. But like you said, there's a big name in that division, and that's Sean O'Malley, and he has a win over the now champion. I'm not saying that they play favoritism all that much in the UFC. Of course, we do see it from time to time.
You're not saying
that?
But
Sugar Sean is he's a meaningful character. Yeah. He has a win over the champion, and I believe if he beats Song Yadong, he will likely draw right into Petr Yan. Timing may work where that winds up happening on the White House. I don't know, but I hope Merab doesn't get slighted. But I do think Merab has earned the right to take 6 months and just chill.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because we know that the Paramount deal we saw with these first quarter of cards that they've announced, like I'm as excited for them as anybody is, but they're very much prioritizing star power over rankings.
And international star power, I'll say, which I kind of give them a little grace because Paramount is going to be a worldwide deal. They're really trying to push this. Dana White's come out and said, I'm not competing, of course, with PFL or Bellator when it was around. I'm not competing with the NFL or NBA. I'm competing with soccer. I want to be the biggest sport in the world. To do that, you have to reach international markets to the highest level. And if you look at what they've booked, we've got we have Paddy coming out of the UK. He's fighting Justin Gaethje, an American. And then the next one, you've got Australia's Volkanovski fighting Mexico's Diego Lopez, Mexico, Brazil. Yeah. So they are hitting international big fights early on, but I do see what you mean. It's not 100% merit based on this beginning of 2026.
And I wonder, just sitting here thinking out loud, if that's why they didn't give it to Lerone Murphy, because they're trying to spread out the star power. And if you've got Paddy, you've already got the UK representative. Are you going to represent them again in the following weekend? Which that's weird too, right? Because there's 2 numbered cards a week apart from each other. It's odd, but anyway, talking about why that matters, it's because the star power seems to be being prioritized,
right?
And when you have the biggest star in the division in Sean O'Malley. And Merab was starting to get to that level, not in the U.S., but internationally, people were starting to gravitate a lot more towards Merab.
Very likable.
So when you're trying to be an international sport, I guess it really doesn't matter all that much, but it would seem like the UFC would like to get Yan and O'Malley locked back in there at some point.
For sure.
But I think just being fair, you've got to give the machine his opportunity.
Yeah.
And luckily for the UFC, as much as I love Merab, I don't think it's that winnable of a fight for him. Now, maybe my mind will change between now and when they make it, but, Yan showed us last night that he's cracked the code, and I don't see how Merab can beat Yan on the feet in any facet. So he's got to take him down. Well, Yan doubled him up on takedowns last night.
Well, and then he made his stats where I think he defended 38 in their first fight, 38 takedowns. Last night, he only defended 27, but Merab only shot 29. So he actually prevented Merab from shooting 20 times, or he shot 20 fewer times in this fight because he just didn't have the opening.
Yeah, that's a 90% takedown defense percentage accuracy against Merab Dvalishvili. Just like
and then just turning it on everybody on their head and going and getting takedowns himself. It's just it shows you we truly can't predict these fights, any sort of way and expect that we're gonna have 100% prediction rates on this, because who would have thought Merab would have got out grappled, and also on the other hand, who would have thought Pantoja's arm would have broken the first minute?
Yeah, no, there's the perfect segue into the co-main event. So Pantoja Van, I mean, so there's not a whole lot to break down about the fight itself, other than to say, for the minute or so we got to see, it looked like it was about to be a banger.
Yeah, for sure.
Josh Van, you know what you're getting out of Josh Van.
Yeah.
Josh Van has cemented himself as one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. Mm-hmm. He's a BMF type of guy if they were ever to make a belt in that weight class, or in the lower weight classes. He's certainly
walks out to many men. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that was Pantoja.
Oh yeah, Pantoja
walked out to many men, but I didn't catch the Van song. As we were talking, I couldn't quite hear it over the speaker. But somebody comment if you know what Josh Van walks out to.
Good
but
call.
Anyways, a couple things here. You got to feel bad for Alexandre Pantoja.
Yes.
You hate to lose your belt as a dominant champion in that way. But on the other side of that coin, you hate to win your belt that way as well. It almost feels to me like it was the worst winning of a belt since Aljo took it off of Petr Yan.
Yeah.
Because of that. Now, it wasn't that bad, because it wasn't like he was getting beat up and he got hit with an illegal strike and now by DQ he's the champion.
Right.
It was a fight that was very much not established as far as who was going to be there was nobody pulling away with it.
Right.
It was evenly matched. It looked like it was going to be exciting.
And both were the aggressors.
Both were the aggressors, and then you have a freak accident.
Right.
So it's like, it's a bummer.
Yep.
But there's a lot to unpack, because I think Joshua Van's next fight will not be against Pantoja.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you have a lot of exciting things. You have Tatsuro Taira, who had a great finish over Brandon Moreno, and so you have some options at 125. We've got Brandon Royval and Manel Kape happening this weekend. We're going to break those fights down. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but it's important that we bring them into the conversation,
right? Because
you have Van, who took no damage virtually last night and is an exciting fighter. Pantoja will likely need at least a year, because he's going to have surgery, it seems.
Yeah.
Then he's got to have 6 months to heal from that surgery. Then he's got to get back in the gym and get back into fight shape. And then he's got to have a fight camp.
Right.
So we're talking about some time, and you don't sit an exciting fighter like Josh Van out, especially when you've got Brandon Royval and Manel Kape happening this coming weekend. So they're on the same schedule, and Tatsuro Taira is on the same schedule. Mm-hmm. So initially, I want to hear, what are your thoughts on the fight? Yeah. And do you think, I don't think Pantoja needs to come back and fight anybody.
No.
And I do think Joshua Van needs to beat Pantoja to solidify himself as a true champion.
Yeah.
However, I do think he's going to defend his belt that he got last night one time before he gets in there with Pantoja. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and it'll either be Kape, Royval, or Tatsuro Taira. And Dana White, he never makes fights, like he was saying. But he did say last night, when one of the reporters, I believe it was from Singapore, asked about, you've got a Burmese champion now. Would you be considering going to Singapore to have an event closer to where he's from? And Dana White kind of spilled the beans a little bit, which he never really does. But he goes, as soon as the fight ended, I told my guy, start looking at venues in Japan. So that tells you, okay, he was really impressed with the feature bout with
Tatsuro Taira,
being the only guy to finish Brandon Moreno. So, they're not going to go to Myanmar to have a fight, because I just don't think there's
the country doesn't have the infrastructure, as far as I can understand. Yeah.
Right. And so it felt to me like, instead of sending it to Singapore, which would be closer to Josh Van's home, let's send it to the opponent, the likely next opponent, Tatsuro Taira's home of Japan. Japan has a rich history in MMA. I think they would really like that fight. Now, of course, they probably have to stack that card up a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that the co-main event, or do they main event that?
Yeah, I don't think you could main event it just yet. So, of course, let's just say Tatsuro becomes a famous Japanese champion. That's still years down the road before he can headline his own thing in his own country. But yeah, I do think that Dana White was very impressed with Taira's performance, and I think he's definitely planning on having Tatsuro fight Van next. And Pantoja, I'm with you. Pantoja does not need to fight anybody else until he fights for a world title next, but he does need to take time and get that thing healed. And like I said, regardless of what happens in the division, Josh Van could go on a 3-fight win streak and be more active than Merab. Doesn't matter. Somebody else could come steal the belt and go on an active streak like Merab. When Pantoja's ready, he gets a title shot. It doesn't matter. And I agree with you that Van does need to beat Pantoja in a more clear way. Look, he won. He did damage. He technically caught a kick.
Yeah.
Put Pantoja on the ground, and when Pantoja went to catch himself, his arm extended. So the intensity of the moment is what caused that to happen. So it's a win. It's a TKO, fair and square. I mean, there's no way you can call it anything but that. But I know it must feel sort of like how Daniel Cormier felt whenever John Jones was like out and DC became the champion, and everybody's like, yeah, you're the champion, but only because he's not here. Yeah. And then of course John Jones comes back down, beats him, and he never really got that full credit, even though DC is truly an all-time great. I just hope the same thing doesn't happen to Van, but I can see how that narrative could happen. Like, yeah, Pantoja was the most dominant 25er. You got it off of a fluke, and you never had to fight him, so you're going to have an easier title defense run. I don't see it that way, but I will say Josh Van, call it luck, call it what you will. I think it's a guy who really knows how to make the most out of huge opportunities, and he says yes to the UFC when they call him. If they say, hey, we need you on short notice. Hey, you're coming up from Fury. All right, we're going to put you in against this guy. You know, they call him. He says yes. Good things happen. He's been in the UFC 2.5 years. He's currently the champion. And he also has lost in that 2.5 years, which shows you how much the UFC likes a guy like Josh Van, who's willing to put it all on the line, who's willing to get in there as actively as a guy like Merab. And good things happen to guys like that. So I couldn't be happier for Josh Van. I think it's really cool that Houston's got a belt. And that is cool. Yeah, I think it would be a lot of fun to see him mix it up with some of those 25ers. I think him versus Manel Kape would be a lot of fun. It would be a striker's delight.
Royval rematch, that was one of the best fights I've ever seen.
Royval's always fun. Yeah. He's like a Diaz brother, but of the modern era.
Taira's a real opponent too. That guy's good, man.
Yeah, Taira absolutely could be a champion, especially, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was DC saying it last night. When Taira came into the UFC, he was like this, he's got a baby face and he was small. Not anymore. He looks like a grown-ass man in there. And, of course, he's still got the BTS.
The haircut says
Korean pop boy band face and the haircut. But his body, I mean, he looks like one of the most physical presences in the
flyweight division, yeah.
Yeah, he looks like he could truly out-grapple or manhandle almost anybody in that division. So I think the sky's the limit for that guy. And him versus Van is a great fight. Of course, recency bias does tend to get us all. And I think because Josh Van is so healthy that we could see a quick turnaround with him and Taira, or we could see a quick turnaround with him and the winner of Royval and Kape, just depending on if they get out unscathed. Sort of like the Arman Sarukian thing, right? Exactly. I believe if they knew Ilia Topuria wasn't going to fight in January against Paddy the Baddy, that they would not have booked Justin, and they would have put Justin in with Hooker, and they would have saved Arman to fight Paddy for the shot at Ilia, essentially. But crazier things happen, and that's what we got.
Yeah, well, what's so funny, and it's funny you bring up Arman, because Arman was a ranked UFC fighter when Joshua Van was still an amateur.
Isn't that crazy?
So think about that for a second. So that shows you how much the UFC prioritizes activity, right?
Yeah.
Arman Sarukian, yes, I think he deserves a title fight. Yes, I think he should be one half. They should take Justin Gaethje out and put Arman in. They're not going to do that.
No.
And, the reality is Arman does have to take some ownership
for sure
of that situation, because of the pullouts, because of the, the reliability. The UFC is going to, if we have learned anything about the organization, is that they are going to fast track you and they are going to prioritize you and do good things for you if you're two things: an exciting fighter who looks for finishes and a fighter who says yes and fights often.
That's right.
If you do those two things, we witnessed last night a 24-year-old young man that was an amateur when we moved to Houston, he was still fighting in the amateurs.
Yeah.
And
5 years ago.
And now he is a UFC champion.
Yeah.
And Arman Sarukian in that same time period has been a ranked UFC fighter and fought some of the best fighters that the world has seen at the 155 division. So really, really something important if there's fighters out there. Be active, say yes, and be exciting.
And stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
And
right?
stay ready. And that's it. And whether you like that formula or you don't, that is the formula that the organization is utilizing.
Right.
That's what they want. And so if you give them what they want, good things will happen to you like they happened to Josh Van last night. I want to talk a little bit about Tatsuro Taira.
Yeah.
And his win over Brandon Moreno, because I think stylistically he may be the toughest matchup for Joshua Van because he's got some power. He's also got great grappling. I mean, Brandon Moreno is a jiu-jitsu ace.
Yes.
He is very good on the ground.
And a scrambling machine.
And
he's so good at scrambling.
I mean, Tatsuro Taira is the real deal.
Oh, yeah. And I thought the ground performance was what was really... That's where the gap in skill was, because Brandon Moreno is a great fighter. Like you said, we've seen him have epic title fights. We've seen him have awesome fights coming up the ranks. Brandon Moreno is most people's favorite current flyweight. He's just so fun to watch. You got to love Brandon Moreno. But this Tatsuro Taira came in like a man on a mission. And one thing that I didn't really like about the beginning of the fight was how Brandon Moreno was standing. I thought his stance was wonky, and it opened up some opportunities for Tatsuro to throw some interesting strikes early on that seemed to open up the floodgates of the fight.
He's always had that kind of wide stance where he leans forward, but it seemed way more exaggerated last night than ever before.
Well, and so I agree with you on that. He always does fight with his hands. Sorry, I'm going to move a little bit, but hands open, and that's how he likes to block the punches coming to his head. That he kind of modifies his high guard, if you will. What he was doing last night was that same thing, except for he was hinging at the hips quite a lot, and that tends to put the weight in your front leg. And everybody knows that as motor in the back is what my coach Crew Bob always says. Motor in the back, you gotta use your back leg to bring yourself inside. That's where your power needs to stay, especially in MMA. Like it's such a rule that in boxing they follow that rule for the most part, but it's even more important in MMA that your weight's on the back foot, because if it's heavy in the front leg, you're more susceptible to getting kicks, and you can't check them in time. You're just going to absorb that shot, and at that level, you can't take too many of them. And the other reason you don't want to have too much weight in your front leg is because if somebody were to try to shoot on you, you're not as able to move back or laterally as you would be able to if the weight was on the back. So I saw Brandon Moreno's stance be a little bit off than what we're used to seeing out of him, and it just didn't work out for him because Taira was able to open up some of his striking, which is high level. He seems to have everything, all of his skills are buttoned up. Clearly he excels on the ground, but his striking is also very high level. He's a fast fighter. And, when it comes to things like takedown defense, it seems to me like his ability to scramble is high level. And if he's able to be the first guy to beat a guy like Brandon Moreno, he could for sure pose some serious problems for Josh Van, who I'm not trying to say is a one-dimensional fighter at all. He certainly isn't. But he wins his fights, and his bread is getting buttered for the most part with his hands right now.
Yeah.
I just think that you may need to come in with a few more tools buttoned up if you're going to beat a guy like Taira after the win and the confidence he's going to have beating and finishing Brandon Moreno.
Yeah, and I know I said submission. It was a ground and pound finish.
Yeah.
So it was, really, really great grappling is kind of the point I wanted to make there.
Yeah.
Like excellent movement, excellent transitions, all the way to the point where he flattened Moreno out and then was able to get the finish there. I mean,
did you think they stopped it a little too
early? A little
early?
Bit, but what was Brandon going to do? He was flattened out.
He was flattened out. He built back up to his knees and then fell back down again, got flattened out again, and then built back up and then was flattened out once again. So the same thing, and they were in the center of the octagon too, right? So there's no wall that he can work off of or anything like that.
Yeah, I didn't see that position getting any better for Moreno.
Right.
And and the more you do that, you build to your knees, boom, he flattens you back out, hits you a few more times. You've exerted more energy and you've taken more shots. You do it again, you've exerted even more energy and you've taken even more shots. I mean, like you said, he wasn't close to the cage. He couldn't wall walk. I think the fight would have been over.
Yeah.
I wish they would have let it go a little bit longer just so Taira wasn't, or just so that he was given the true, what do you want to say, justice that he was deserved for getting a finish over an incredibly durable opponent like Brandon Moreno. But I don't think it would have made a difference. I think the writing was on the wall there.
I agree.
And so we have on one hand Tatsuro Taira.
Yep. Great
opponent for Van for all the reasons that we mentioned. And that kind of makes me want to move into, but I want to come back to Peyton Talbott. Okay. And a couple of other fights on the UFC 323 card because, I mean, 7 knockout finishes.
Crazy.
This was one of the best cards, as far as exciting fights go that we've seen all year, if not the best card.
Leaving ESPN
with a bang. Everybody's like, oh, they're really sticking it to the ESPN on the way out. Like, first of all, that main event was incredible. The co-main event was heading towards incredible, and then a weird thing that could happen to any fighter.
Yeah.
But bangers on the card. Yeah. I mean, there's so many great knockouts and finishes. Let's talk just a little bit briefly on Royval and Kape.
Yeah.
Because that's the other potential, the winner of that's the other potential opponent for Van. And then we'll come back and finish up on Henry Cejudo, Peyton Talbott, and some of the other things. So let's talk about this coming weekend's fight. Manel Kape, Brandon Royval.
Great fight.
Really, really good fight. Yeah. This is high level, high speed, high output. It's going to be everything you want out of a flyweight fight, which is excitement, pace, speed, volume.
Yeah.
Manel Kape is much more accurate with landing his strikes, 55% to about 40%. So it's a big disparity there. Crazy. He's very elusive. He's also got better striking defense.
Yes.
Brandon Royval, interestingly enough, I think needs to grapple in this fight because he's got better takedowns. I think Kape's takedown ratio sits at about 30% of the takedowns that he attempts, he hits, whereas Royval's is about 75.
Yeah.
So I think Brandon Royval actually needs to successfully get this fight to the ground a few times and do some damage there in order to get the jump over Kape just because of how accurate he is and how difficult he is to hit. So what are your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, Manel Kape is very high level on the feet. We've seen that time and time again. He's got a speed advantage on almost every flyweight, which is saying a lot. But Brandon Royval, like I said, he's one of the most exciting guys at flyweight, and his style is so fun to watch. He's very good at grappling, but I believe if he's going to grapple Manel Kape, which he should, he's going to have to open it up with striking, and he's going to have success on the feet before he can get the fight to the ground, which is easier said than done because I've seen Manel Kape in there in a couple of fights, and I thought, I know this guy is a striker. I know he's supposed to be high level as a striker, but is he missing some holes in his game as far as the grappling goes? And then you'll see him get in fights where his takedown defense is flawless. He's got really high level takedown defense and they can't even get him to the ground. Maybe they'll get him up against the cage, but he works he digs double unders, he spins them off, and then he puts their back on the wall just so he can create some distance and strike again. He's very, very good at controlling the range on the feet. But Royval is a dog, and he's very, very durable.
He's got the experience, too. The competition that he's faced is the who's who of the division.
Yeah, and this might actually play a factor because it's 5 rounds. You know, Kape, up until – I don't think he's had a 5-round fight in the UFC yet. But I know Brandon Royval has.
Oh, yeah.
And Brandon Royval is built for 25 minutes. He's a cardio machine, kind of like Merab. Kape – he's not quite known as the cardio machine. He's not quite seen as the well-rounded guy that Brandon Royval is, but what he does, he's special at. And if he can keep this fight on the feet and keep a guy like Brandon Royval from taking him to the ground, I think it's a very tough night in the office for Brandon Royval because Manel Kape, he's got pop on his shot, and like I said, that you mentioned it too. His striking defense is high level. You'll see guys try to chop leg kicks at him all night, and he's just pulling it right out of range.
Yeah.
And then he's usually countering with something pretty good. So I'm excited for that one. If you want my prediction, I'm gonna go Manel Kape. I'm going to go Manel Kape via decision. I think Brandon Royval is a little bit too hard to get out of there. I don't see Manel finding a way to finish him on the ground. But again, this is 125. It's harder for them to find single shot KOs. So I'm going to go Manel Kape via decision.
I think this fight hinges on Brandon Royval's ability to strike enough and be accurate enough to get inside and get takedowns. Yeah. Because when you look at the disparity in the striking accuracy with significant strikes, Manel Kape lands far more significant strikes at a far more accurate clip than Royval does.
Right.
And then, as we mentioned, the defense is much better for Manel Kape. He does not get hit with as much as Brandon Royval does. So Brandon has to strike intelligently enough to get himself inside and get the fight to the ground and then do damage there, either look for a submission or just look for control time and win a decision.
Yeah.
But I think that's easier said than done. I do like Manel Kape to win this fight by decision. I think that he's going to solidify himself as potentially the number one contender. It's either him or Tatsuro Taira, and I think we're going to see Josh Van paired up against one of the two of them. But it's really also much like we talked about the middleweight situation with Nasruddin Imavov and Fluffy and RDR and all that.
Hamzat.
Yeah, exactly. That was the Hamzat sweepstakes. Now some weird things happened, and we've got now Fluffy versus Sean Strickland here in Houston.
Yeah.
But what we said was whoever wins the most excitingly out of these four fighters is going to get the next shot. So it's almost like when you look at Tatsuro Taira, very impressive against the former champion, second round finish. Yeah. Now Manel Kape and Brandon Royval know, okay, if we want to take the first crack, and I know Brandon Royval would because that was one of the best fights ever and it was a very close fight. If you want to take the first crack at the champion, at the new champion, you got to win more impressively than Tatsuro Taira did. So the stakes are high for this because both of these guys really want a title shot, especially Manel Kape. And that's why I actually like Manel. My prediction was going to be decision, but that was leading up to last night. I think Manel Kape's gonna fight like hell for the finish. I like him by knockout. I like him by knockout in the fourth round.
Damn. We'll see. And would that be enough for him to get it? Because Tatsuro, he beat in the second round a former champion. Will beating a never having been champion in Brandon Royval be in the fourth round be impressive enough to steal Tatsuro Taira's spot? I don't know. I mean, it may have to rely on if it's striking versus submitting. I don't know, but I could see how it's almost impossible unless you go out there and get a first round finish for you to jump a guy like Taira, who now Dana White apparently, as of last night, is saying they're looking in Japan for an event venue.
But the UFC likes styles.
True.
And, Joshua Van versus Manel Kape is a striker's paradise.
That's a great fight.
And not that Tatsuro Taira versus Joshua Van wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But Tatsuro does have that grappling ability, as we saw last night. Even though he didn't submit Brandon Moreno, he manhandled him on the floor. And so does the UFC go the other direction because of just the stylistic beauty that would be Manel Kape versus Joshua Van? I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is, either one of these guys need to win in a significant fashion, and that's why I'm taking Kape by knockout.
Yeah, and can I just say, Pantoja's the man. Joshua Van is the champion, but it takes a special kind of guy to walk out and go up against a young, hungry guy like Josh Van.
Who was number 12 not that long ago.
Literally. And not in the UFC a whole lot longer before that. But to go out there, and we always talk about the difference between boxing and MMA. MMA is so interesting because within the first 10 seconds, you're seeing wild exchanges. There's no feeling out process. Pantoja is the world champion. If there's anybody that's earned the right for a feeling out process in MMA, it's a world champion in a smaller division. All right, it's going to be 125ers. I'm going to need to go all 25 minutes likely because it's hard to finish. No, he goes out there like a zombie, like the cannibal he claims to be. And he's just out there. He was just walking Van down. And of course, the fight ended up ending really fast. But I have a feeling that fight was going to be an all-time great
flyweight fight. It was heading
that way. And I really hope Joshua Van can go on a win streak and Pantoja can heal himself up. And, maybe he needs to go to Ways to Well, get some stem cells shot in his arm or whatever he needs to do. Joe Rogan will probably hook it up. But whatever he needs to do, and we need to get Josh Van and Pantoja again for the belt. I hope everything can stay the way it is. It's a finicky division and a lot of things can change in a very short amount of time, but I really do want to see a full fight between Josh Van and Pantoja because I think that would be an absolute barn burner.
Absolutely. So that really just leaves two fights on the main card. Guskov and Blachowicz was a majority draw. Not much to talk about. They're kind of a slow-paced fight. The guys both had their moments. I think it was draw on two cards and then Blachowicz on one judge's scorecard, but that second round being a 10-8. It's just a weird all around. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of thought on that fight. Did you have anything that stood out to you as far as that goes?
I thought it was interesting. I don't remember the exact stat, but they were saying that like a certain amount of Yan's last few fights have been draws, which is kind of crazy.
If you want to make some money, bet on Yan Blachowicz to be involved in a draw.
Yeah, right. And you know that probably fired people up on the parlays, because it's like when you're playing roulette and it lands on double zero.
It's the damn double zero.
Yeah. Did you hear, by the way, I'm not trying to go off track, but did you hear that they started making roulette tables with a triple zeros now to lower the chances for the player even more? There's single, double, and triple zeros. So,
as if the casinos weren't
winning enough already.
Enough.
Yeah, but either way, that's just a horse of a different color, but it was interesting.
Yeah. So that fight, I don't think it really has a whole lot of implication for the division. Yan, it's a majority draw. Nobody really moves forward. Yan was the champion. He's in his 40s now. He's going to be fun. He'll hang around for a couple more fights. But to me, what was way more interesting was Peyton Talbott and Triple C.
Yeah, Cejudo.
So
the whole team retiring.
The whole team retiring. And then it's just like you said in the beginning of this video, who would have thought that Petr Yan would double Merab up on the takedowns? Who would have thought that the first person to land a double leg in the Triple C versus Peyton Talbott fight would be Peyton Talbott?
Yeah, after another successful takedown he had already hit.
After I think it was a throw, almost like a judo throw of some kind.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was an inside leg trip.
Yeah,
it was an inside leg trip because he ended up
inside leg trip
in guard. Man, Peyton's good, man.
Yeah.
He's got some hands on him.
And Peyton, 5'10", so he's got the right frame for that division. 135 was sort of a division for the 5'6", the 5'5" to 5'8" guys, kind of stocky builds. We saw that for years and years. And then the O'Malley era came around. And now we're starting to see these guys who can really fill that frame out. And Peyton Talbott at 5'10" seems to fill it out pretty well. He was saying it was kind of hard to hit Cejudo because every time he'd throw punches, because he's so short, he would punch his forehead, which, if you know, that's the hardest part of anybody's head. And you're not going to do a whole lot of damage on a guy like Triple C's forehead because he's been using his forehead to wrestle since he was this big. So, he's got probably a lot of, scar tissue and stuff built up there. But Peyton Talbott was able to basically fight his fight against one of the most decorated fighters that's ever played any combat sport at all. I mean, Henry Cejudo, in my opinion, is a top 5 combat sports athlete of all time. And
100%.
You have to put him in there because of his accolades. Of course, the later part of Henry's career is not what I would have done. I probably would have advised him to do things a little bit differently than, take the 125 belt and then move immediately up to 35. So he didn't get a defense at 25, which would have paid him. And then he got the belt at 135 and then
he sat out 3 years in his prime. It was weird.
Right. I just feel like he mismanaged a couple things, and he really probably would have come down to being potentially the greatest combat sports athlete of all time if he would have gotten 1 or 2 more title defenses while he was active in the champion. But, Cejudo does his own thing. He operates the way an Olympic gold medalist operates, and we have to appreciate what we got out of Cejudo. But I will say, it felt to me like whenever he retired, he was just kind of, he had done everything he needed to do and wanted to sort of exit on a high note. I'm the champion. I don't need to prove anything else. But then you get that itch, like all fighters do. I think Dustin Poirier's starting to itch a little bit again, and you just can't escape that. But it was really fun to see Peyton Talbott show Henry Cejudo a little bit of grace, just like we saw Max Holloway with Justin Gaethje. I've beat you in every minute of this fight, but in the last 10 seconds, we're going to stand in the Monster Energy can and we're going to throw hands.
You got your chance.
He got his chance. And then, of course, he ate the biggest knee of the fight from Peyton Talbott right there in the last 5 seconds. He eats that. And for me, as a fight fan, and you understand how the sport works, Chael Sonnen always says you don't leave this sport as champion, you leave it face down and embarrassed. And it almost felt like it was a better way to end the Henry Cejudo chapter of the UFC. Watching him go out like an absolute dog, passing the torch to the next generation, a guy who he's actually trained with. So who knows? Maybe he knew going into this that this was a bad matchup. Maybe he thought he would get the jump on the younger guy because of what they did in training. But again, these guys like Peyton Talbott, these younger guys who are still so fresh in the game, they're making improvements and upping their skill level in between every fight. And so even if they did train together a year and a half, 2 years ago, and Henry had the better of him, and that's why he wanted to fight him on his retirement fight, maybe to try to go out on top, Peyton Talbott just showed I'm making crazy improvements. And I think Peyton Talbott is for sure going to find himself in title contention probably by the end of next year. But there's a lot of fun fights with 135 has been dominant for a while, and there's been a lot of great names. But with Alexandre Topuria coming in, Peyton Talbott now making a name for himself, Wellmaker stubbed his toe, but I guarantee after one more win, he'll probably find his way back into being a competitive, potentially ranked fighter.
You got
Umar.
Merab is still very much in the mix.
Somehow Zahabi got himself in there. Did you?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
you see Sugar Sean say, "I didn't want to fight Dong. I wanted to fight Zahabi, but they wouldn't let me have Zahabi." So I don't know if he's trying to cherry pick an easy win. Zahabi might be the easiest ranked win that you can get at 135, but at the same time, I think him versus Dong is probably a little bit more reasonable.
Yeah, Song Yadong versus Sean is interesting to me. I do like Sean in that, and I actually like Sean versus Peyton Talbot.
Oh,
I think that's the fight.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, yes, there's going to be some push from the UFC if Sean knocks out Song Yadong to for sure, like, let's see if Petr Yan can right that wrong. For sure. Anytime you can get Sean O'Malley locked in for a title fight, it's a good night of business.
Yep.
But I think you got to give that rematch to Merab, which means you got to do something fun with Sean. You know, him and Peyton are going to line up somewhat as far as scheduling goes. They fought about a month apart, so you could reasonably think that they could be ready around the same time.
Yeah.
That to me is a huge fight in bantamweight. It's definitely a measuring stick type of fight for Peyton Talbott because that's a former champion.
See where you stand.
I get it. Triple C is a former champion too, but it's different.
He's different.
Sean's not 40. You know what I mean?
And he's from the new era.
He's very much in the mix. He's from the new era, and he's still a very skilled striker. And I think stylistically that would be just an incredible fight. So I hope that the UFC makes that fight for Talbott next. I would love to see O'Malley versus Talbott, provided that O'Malley beats Song Yadong. And then I like to see the winner of that get put into a #1 contenders fight while Peter and Merab sort out their thing. You know, Umar, I think he's going to walk through Davison as much as I like Davison. But I think Umar versus Yan or Merab works either way you shake it. So I think you're going to have to see probably 2 wins for O'Malley and 2 wins for Talbott. So why not put them together?
Yeah, well, see, here's my thing. I think Sean O'Malley's 1 win away. I think if Sean beats Dong, he's going to fight for the belt in his next fight after that, especially if Merab doesn't have that belt.
Yeah.
Sean is the best champ that they can have at 135 because he's the biggest name. Here, let me just throw one at you. Peyton Talbott versus Corey Sandhagen.
I like that one too.
That's a
I don't like it
interesting
as much as Sean, but I like it.
Yeah, I think that basically 135 is wide open again. There's some big names, there's some new names, and there's a whole bunch of stuff about to take place. 2026 is going to be a big year for bantamweight,
and I think that's a perfect place to cap the conversation.
I do too, man. Thank you.
Thank you.